I also am a human being with opinions and feelings, and it's hard to suppress those at all times.
You have feelings?
Sometimes.
Oh.
Craig was asking Daniel if he can say on air. You're not allowed to put that as the intro. No, my parents listen to this show, Daniel. They still have sensitivities.
It's me,
okay?
Man. Put me on the phone with
Who,
them.
me?
I'll tell them that I swear every other word, and you're a preacher.
Well, I guess, yeah, okay. Welcome to the Georgia Politics Podcast. It is Friday, April 26, 2019. We're joined by another panel today to talk about the last 2 weeks of news. Got a couple great topics to get to. Let's start by introducing our panelists. We'll go to my right first.
Hi, I'm Pallavi, Purkayastha, and I don't work at the Capitol anymore, so I'm currently unemployed. I don't know how to introduce myself anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you
cool.
on that front. Yeah, I'm Preston Thompson,
okay.
and I do stuff. Yeah.
This is Craig Kidd. I'm first vice chairman of the Fulton GOP and chief of staff to Johns Creek Mayor Mike Botker. And I remember those days heavily. That's how I started working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car many years ago.
Now gainfully employed, Craig Kidd. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my last session was in 2005, so that was a long time ago.
And you had a quick shout out you wanted to give at the top of the show?
Yes, thank you very much. And I wanted to do it at the beginning as opposed to the end because I wanted to make sure that frankly, that I remembered. We had, here in Johns Creek, we had a retirement of a police officer, Major Weaver. He retired after 37 years on the police force, 14 with Johns Creek. He actually served, and then the previous with Fulton County. He actually was up here in Johns Creek before we became a city, so it was quite familiar with the area. And I just left his retirement party. I just wanted to give a shout out to him and his family, an impressive family. He was actually the youngest of 11 kids, and he asked his sisters to stand up, and 7 women, popped up, and the guy had more nieces and nephews there than you can count. I just wanted to say to Major Weaver, thank you very much for your service. I cannot imagine being a police officer for 37 years.
That is a long time.
I couldn't do it. Very few people can. So I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations on behalf of the city and behalf of me personally.
Yeah, I will extend those as well.
Same here.
And let's get right into it. So, before we get into the Georgia-specific news, Joe Biden has entered the presidential race. I want to talk about it at least a little bit before we move on to something else. The field is pretty much set. There's only one notable name for us here at the Georgia Politics Podcast that we'd be considering. But let's talk about if Georgia right now, I know we're forecasting maybe 18 months or something like that. If Georgia is in play for the general election, part one. Part two, how we think, Georgia behavior might play out in a Democratic primary. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I think Georgia is very much in play next year. I still think that that President Trump, if he is the Republican nominee, I think he will win. But I think it will take money and it will take time. I just pulled it up here. I mean, he beat Hillary by 200,000 votes, 51 and some change versus 46. I mean, that's not a ridiculous margin. So I think it will definitely be in play.
And I think what's substantial is just how quickly that margin's been changing. If you look at the past midterms, every 2 years and every 4 years, the margin's been getting smaller and smaller by leaps and bounds. And yeah, I think we're definitely going to be in play. And if we get the right person and the right VP candidate, that person might take Georgia.
Census data that came out earlier this week says that certain demographics are up in voting in Georgia, just like they reflected across the country. Voters aged 19 to 29 have jumped up some percentage-wise. For a midterm, getting those voters re-energized for a presidential, I think is probably pretty likely, seeing as that's easier to do.
I think the other thing I would disagree with my colleague on there, almost more for humor's sake, is that I personally believe that the vice president doesn't do anything for you anymore. I think that he can only hurt you, or he or she can only hurt you, really helping you, especially in a particular state. I just don't think. I think the electorate's moved on from that. My first bit of evidence would be if a VP really hurt you, then Mike Dukakis would have won because Dan Quayle would have sunk, George H.W. Bush. You want to talk about a VP candidate with a terrible reputation at the time.
Well, but it's weird because we were just talking about Joe Biden, but former vice presidents have a pretty solid track record when running for the party's nomination the next time. Maybe not winning in the general, but securing their party's nomination.
Former or sitting?
I suppose both. Because I'm thinking like 3 of the last 4 possibly more than that, have secured their party's nomination.
Really?
Yeah. Gore. Do we want to run through the list?
Yeah,
here?
I can go backwards if you want.
Well, you're the history major, so we've got Gore in 2000.
Well, you had Hillary in 16, so that doesn't count. Then you had Obama in 12 and 8, that doesn't count.
I'm not talking
4
about.
was Kerry.
I'm talking about the last sitting vice presidents to run have secured their party's nomination.
Oh, well, that's different.
Right. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, so what is it about? I always look at a vice presidential choice as an opportunity to elevate somebody. Do you think the eventual winning candidate, if they choose to elevate Stacey Abrams to a national stage, do you agree with Craig that still doesn't do a lot to put the state in play?
No, I don't. I think if Stacey Abrams is the vice presidential candidate, I think we take Georgia, just because she's still going to hold on to that momentum. It might not. I might partially agree that it might not ring true in every state, but I think when you have a Stacey Abrams as someone who is such a huge name in a swing state, this stuff only kind of plays at the margins, and we're at the margins, and it probably will play in our favor.
Gotcha.
Presidential candidates in this particular regard are very selfish, meaning that they don't pick a VP to elevate somebody else. They pick a VP to only help themselves. We have not had this is history. We have not had a VP candidate that was brought in to specifically win one state since 1948, which was Earl Warren. For the love of God, I mean, that's some history
That's
right
a deep
there.
pull.
That's some footnotes right there. So I don't see Biden or Warren or whoever is the Democratic nominee would pick somebody specifically for one state. I mean, obviously, there's all sorts of different factors in on that.
I agree with you in that I don't think picking Abrams necessarily puts the South on the table like some people say it does. I mean, I think Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, these places have a long way to go, and they don't have the huge metropolitan hub that Georgia has that basically makes us a quote-unquote swing state.
I think it puts demographics on the table, though.
You would be able to better answer this question than I guess I would. The point that you're getting is that if Abrams is a VP, then it increases minority turnout, increases black turnout,
female turnout.
Turnout. Aren't they as motivated already? I mean, there is a breaking point.
Sure, but what I'm saying
doesn't
is
Trump
these
do it
things,
enough?
to some extent, but what I'm saying is these things only play at the margins.
Yeah.
You can't take a 46 to a 51, but you could take a 48 to a 51, and I think she would be the person to do it. Or she plays to the demographics. When you're at that, the margins that you just said, that could flip if you have just that extra 2% turnout in each of those demographics.
I just, coming in from the outside on that, I just think that Trump is so divisive that the Dem turnout is going to be as high as humanly possible that, Moses himself, if he's on the ticket, isn't going to raise the turnout level on the Democratic side. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Trump's not going to take the Democratic turnout to 100%, right?
No.
So even if you're
Abrams,
sitting
there
at
is a
80%,
yeah, I just think that Trump already achieves at max Dem turnout. That's reasonable. I just don't see that Stacey or anybody would be able to raise it at already fever pitch that it's already going to be at.
How long does she have to make a decision? What do we think?
she's given herself until September now, right?
Oh, good Lord.
Well, so I mentioned this a couple shows ago, or I think even on our last show, and I think I got something wrong, is that in her words, to run for Senate, she's not giving herself until September. To run for president, she's giving herself until September.
Really?
That's how I understand it. That seems a little bit backwards, but it's possible I'm getting that wrong, but I did more research after we talked about it a couple weeks ago. So I would like to think a Senate decision would be coming a little quicker because that's the deadline she's kind of self-imposed in terms of April and May.
Well, when is the first Democratic debate in Miami? Is that June, July?
June.
So she's going to jump in 3 months after the first debate? Wow.
I mean, there's no way she's still running for president. It's just the field is 20 people strong right now. It doesn't do her any favors.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor, play a fun little exercise and go through the candidates and name all the people you've never
Absolutely
heard of before. Somebody
Seth Moulton,
somebody on the
on the list?
Somebody on the wonderful part of the internet made a composite face
Oh,
of
wow.
all of the white men
Yes.
below 1% in the polls, and it just looks, to be frank, it kind of looks like me. So
Kind of generic
yeah,
boilerplate white guy.
they all blend
That's pretty
together.
funny.
They
That's
all
pretty
blend.
funny.
Eric
I have to find this
Swalwell,
out.
Seth Moulton, Tim Ryan, Hick and they all blend together, and it's
Yeah.
hard to watch this field at this point.
Yeah, but how many of them are actually going to stay past their state's qualifying deadline?
But then why are you doing this? Oh, okay, Pallavi.
That does look a lot like him. Yeah, that's funny. Thank you.
Yeah, good looking guy.
We discussed
be
this in
my
an earlier
wallpaper
show. There is no negative nowadays to running for office. In fact, I think it was Politico wrote a story about it
Yeah.
that helps you for future runs, helps you with a book sale, helps you get on podcasts, helps you get on paid speeches. Hillary Clinton proved the fortune you could make doing speeches.
Well, but she ran a full-fledged campaign.
Well, this was even before she ran.
Oh, you mean like back in
after
2008
08?
or
After
something?
08.
Yeah.
So there's just no negative nowadays to it.
Yeah, and
Gives you a chance to get on there, talk for your 8-9 minutes. If you nail it, you never know.
yeah, I kind of hope we find a negative at some point, though. I would like to find ways to consolidate the field, but that's okay. All right, moving on a little bit closer to home. No, go ahead.
I have a solution for that. Go back to convention style.
In the back room, with
Kill the
cigars?
primaries. Kill the primaries. Go back
Okay.
to the conventions, and then you will really narrow the field. At least after the first ballot.
So are we going to
'Cause-
talk about the anti-establishment candidate in CD7 now?
Yes. Good transition. Congressional District 7, currently held by Rob Woodall, who is not seeking re-election, narrowly defeated Carolyn Bordeaux by 400 votes. Pallavi, that's your neck of the woods. Okay. There are a good amount of candidates declared for both sides. Interesting one on the Republican side declared this past week that shook things up a little bit, made a little bit of national attention with a splashy new ad. Her name is Lynn Homrich. Homrick.
I'll go with Homework.
Lynn Homrick, who, interestingly enough, right now doesn't live in the district.
I thought she
Is
moved
that
to
true? I
Duluth.
thought she did live in the
She
district.
either lives in it or
She just moved to
Yeah,
CD7
just
from
moved.
CD6.
yes, from CD6,
Is
which,
what I read.
the Buckhead area, I think, ish, which State Senator Renee Unterman liked to point out that she's from the Buckhead area.
Yeah.
But she has moved into district, dropped a splashy new ad. Former Vice President of Human Resources for Home Depot, working under Arthur Blank. She runs a nonprofit that prepares women for leadership roles, outsider, businesswoman kind of mentality. Her announcement ad featured Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, really just a wonderful lineup of scattered congressmen and women from across the country.
Scattered? Okay.
Well, yeah, I don't
Unique
know.
word.
Of course, I know the answer to this question, but I have to ask it anyways. I'm not sure why we're talking about AOC in Northeast Metro Atlanta. Like, I get it, but
Do you, though? I mean,
It
they're
just-
going after the same. And I say this with respect. I remember when Angelica ran, literally every mailer was socialist Angelica Couch, and it backfired.
Nancy Pelosi.
It backfired spectacularly because it was comically unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they decided to double down on that.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, it was, I've been looking for a GOP candidate to come into that race who maybe takes on an outsider businessman or businesswoman perspective, and I think that could be very powerful in that race. Did not expect that person to come out with such a strong rebuke, especially in a district that is really competitive. Not an easy Republican win in a primary that could be a little nasty too.
Yes. No, I was very impressed with her announcement. She's a very attractive candidate. I feel like I have to preface it by saying that I did work for Renee Unterman, both as a paid and as an unpaid campaign person. I worked for her when she first ran for the House in '98, and then when she ran for the state Senate in 2002 with the most egregious map that anybody could draw. So I'm still very close with Renee, and if she declares, I will do everything I can to help her win the primary and the general. With that being said, I still think that the Ms. Homerick looks like an incredibly attractive candidate, great resume. In a lot of ways, I think exactly what the Republican Party needs. Now, we don't really know anything about her ideology. I don't know if this person is Barry Goldwater or if this person is John McCain. So I just don't know where she is on the spectrum yet. But just from the cosmetic of it, which we're all now obsessed with in today's politics, I think that she would be a very strong contender. I think Renee will be one as well. So if the field remains the two of them, then I'll be a much happier camper. There's also a third gentleman in there, but I don't think
Has Unterman officially declared for the race?
Has,
No.
And David Clark is not looking at it anymore?
No,
He is-
David
he has
Clark
said
is
he
not
is officially not.
He's not looking at it, and Renee has not officially said yay or nay.
Okay.
And the last time that seat was open, I believe 8 Republicans ran in the primary.
Yeah, but
Really?
that was a different time.
That was
There was
pre
there was
Rob
no,
Woodall.
there was no chance we could lose the seat, so we were a little more willing to throw slings and arrows. Now I think there's a little bit more of a hesitancy to split.
With a 400 vote margin, I think
Mm-hmm.
both sides should be looking at it as something they can win. She will partially self-fund her own campaign,
And I think that's what makes her an attractive candidate.
Right.
Because for whatever party you're running for, if you say, I'll take care of a few million, the party is already interested in you because they can save that few million.
Without
That happens on our side too. I mean, that's how Jim Barksdale got the nomination in 2016. I did not find her rollout impressive. I think she just took a gun and shot herself in the foot. Like you said, AOC, Ilhan Omar, they have nothing to do with Georgia. If you look at the Democratic, just the policies, they're kind of to the left, and CD7 is left of center. It's not Inman Park. It's not Grant Park.
It's slightly left of center. It's also majority minority district
Exactly.
too. And like Craig said, we've really only got the cosmetics to look at right now. Calling out not just congressmen and women, but also pretty prominent minority figures too in a majority minority district. Some people might say the Democrats in that district would already be alienated just by the little letter next to her name, but she's not really doing
She's
herself
not
any
trying,
favors
no.
in general.
And I'm going to push back a little bit on ideology there, Craig, just because she ends saying, I will support President Trump's blah, blah, blah agenda. So it's hard to say I don't know where she stands when she's she's not a Senator McCain Republican if in her very first announcement, it's about supporting Trump. I think the weird thing is I think she would have been a very competitive person if she hadn't gone the Trump smooching route.
Basically, the resume looks right.
The resume looks great, but she came out saying, if your kids behave like these 3 minority women, you would ground them. By the way, I'm supporting the guy who said things like, grab him by the whole countries. I mean, he's as foul-mouthed as they come. And she said, if you act like these women, really, they talk, they're loud, but they're not vicious and they're not vile. And she
They're
said,
also not from Georgia. I get.
Wow, there's a couple different things there. The thing about Trump, even John McCain and Paul Ryan said we will support the Trump agenda when we agree with it. So that's just basically a standard line that every Republican would use, just like every Democrat said they would support President Obama's agenda. Even if the guy running in rural Kentucky still said that, as long as they agreed with it. And let's be honest here, Homrich did not say. Nowhere in that thing did she say anything about minority women. She highlighted the 3 most well-known, or at least most publicity-seeking Democrats right now in the legislature and or in the Congress. And how did she? And what clips did they show? They just didn't show pictures of them, and or pictures of them celebrating their ethnicity. AOC, the clip with AOC in it was how she says that capitalism is unsustainable. That's a pretty good argument in Gwinnett County. The second one, I apologize, I forget which one that was. The quote was she's ready to throw down.
Ilhan Omar, which is
she's getting aggressive. We're going to throw down. We're the politician who's going to fight.
Yeah,
well, that
but
plays
when I think
pretty
of your
well,
party,
Gwinnett.
I don't think about Mahatma Gandhi. You guys throw it out too.
And then the third one, what was the quote in the third one? Is that we're going to impeach the mother, blah, 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 blah. So she showed 3 photos. She showed 3 clips on an ideological and then aggressive, and then I don't even know what you say when you say impeach the mother. Blah, blah.
Can we? But I want to go back.
My point is that I don't want that. Unfortunately, the Democrats seem to want to see this as a racist or racially insensitive ad.
It is.
So
I don't know because she's going after what they say. She's not going after what they are.
Well,
look, if you want to talk about socialism, you can talk about Bernie Sanders, but she didn't. She picked on AOC. If you want to talk about throwing down, there are plenty of Democrats who, I mean, A.G. Holder said when they're down,
Kick up.
Eric
Holder.
But she's picking on minority women, and she doesn't have to make it a racial thing. The underlying meaning is there. And again, it's not happening in a silo. It's happening with these women are bad. We should ground them. I'm gonna clutch my pearls and whack my finger at them while supporting a guy who says and does worse.
Well, and just the fact that she's a woman gives her a little bit more of a leeway in doing that, because she's not only playing the ideology card, she's also playing the gender card in the sense that women can be better than this. I think that's a quote that she says, women can be better than this. That is a throwback to an ideological and a manner.
Can be better.
Well, that's fine too. To them, it's all the same thing. But she went after an ideology and a mannerism. It's like the old line from the schools. I can't tell you what to think, but I can tell you how to act. That's how schools were run in this country. And it's the same sort of principle.
And here's another thing I want to mention.
Hold on.
We're cutting off the hose too much.
I'm going to grab this show by the scruff of the neck.
Okay, you might end up in her ad next. Calm
down. Your original premise was based on she picked well-known activist-oriented Democrats, but then we, collectively as a group, I blank on the name of the third one. Pallavi might know. I only know the first two, and you only knew the first one she mentioned. So we're pretty clued in, seeing as we're on the Georgia Politics Podcast. We don't even know some of these people. And I mean, like Pallavi said, if you wanted to go after bigger issues, like, why not go to Nancy Pelosi like everybody else does? So
she will. Don't worry.
I think calling it racist might be too much, but when people make ads on campaign rollouts that they've been planning, ads are intentional. You do things with intent. You don't do anything. You don't edit video for 18 hours by accident. So I think as a viewer, I look at the imaging or the messaging, the images she used, and the people she picks as a reference as a cue of where she's going to go and how she's going to run, because that's what she wants me to do. She wants me to take that as like a psychological cue.
Inflammatory rhetoric merits a response. She did not pick 3 scenes where these 3 congresswomen were doing their duty on the House floor or speaking at a town hall. She picked 3 specific episodes where one of them said a ideologically controversial thing, and 2 of them were rather had very bad manners. Bad manners. Throw down, which isn't bad, but then they impeach the mother of I mean, you can't go out there, be assertive, expect people to clap to it, to applaud it, to say, oh, you're an up and comer for saying these things, and then get mad when the other side pushes back on it and says you shouldn't be saying these things.
But you can find some hypocrisy in what Pallavi was saying. I think she called it pearl clutching, when she immediately at the end of a 90-second ad goes to supporting wholeheartedly the president's policies, and the president is not exactly a stanchion of institutionalism at this point either. So, I'm listen, we're all looking at a 90-second ad and a 90-second rollout effectively. The candidate is going to self-fund, and she might as well borrow the jean jacket from David Perdue. I mean, it's that mold.
Yeah, she's a David Perdue type
right,
candidate.
We're going off the announcement, and Pallavi, isn't there an argument that it was at least in some way successful, seeing as it garnered national attention and forced, as maybe, ill-hearted as it was, forced some of these people to respond, and now she's kind of a known figure in the race. Would she have been if she ran a moderate ad?
Look, a national attention candidate only works for you if you're going to fundraise toward that. If you're already going to self-fund, getting attention from rural Georgia is not going to do you any favors in CD7.
To do both.
I will push back on the fact that it wasn't meant. I think it was intentional, and it was just done perfectly in a sense of, you can say, well, I wasn't going after their identity, except she picked 3 prominent women of color. The Forsyth County Tea Party put out a post saying something about Nabila Islam, who was one of the Democratic candidates, and called her Georgia's own Congresswoman.
Omar.
Ilhan
Omar, yeah.
They have nothing in common other than the fact that they're both Muslim. Mm-hmm. And that's the angle they're going for. It's you demonize the minorities. You don't say you are, You say it's about ideology and you say about manners, but you very specifically pick the people you want to alienate. And you tell your base, oh, these are the people coming after you. She said, the liberals in Washington are coming after my way of life. I don't know what a candidate who can self-fund. Like, I don't know what we ever did to her way of life.
That's been a Republican charge in commercials dating back to
Right.
1968.
So maybe it's time we start talking.
I mean,
about
that's
it.
not that would
But
be
you're
that would be like complaining that a Democrat is saying they want to raise taxes. I mean, that is as old of a line
not.
as you could do.
The thing is, you're analyzing all of these in silos, and maybe in that it works. But when you put all of this together, that she's cozying up to a guy who, I mean, she's founder of She's a 10, right? She's the founder of the ED or something.
Yes.
And I looked through their website, and the entire concept is that women are much more than numbers. So you can be a 10, and that doesn't necessarily have to be about your attractiveness. She's cozying up to a guy who rated his own daughter a 10 on the Howard Stern show. It makes no sense. When you put all of that together, it makes no sense.
But
And I honestly would have been very impressed with her if she didn't go that route. Her resume does look good. But the way she came out swinging in a majority-minority district, on top of that, I mean, Bordeaux lost by 433 votes. So if two more Democrats had showed up per precinct, we would have had a Democratic congresswoman from the CD7. And that's not including the thousands of ballots that got thrown out because of exact match, or thousands of absentees that didn't show up.
This reminds me of a Nixon 1960 statement, but that's a different conversation.
okay, so
But I'm just saying, the landscape has changed, and I don't feel like the GOP has learned much from 2018.
is Craig, in that race, is there room for a Republican that does maybe something to separate themselves from the president? Like maybe with a similar resume. I'm asking not as like, I know it sounds like I'm asking as like a hopeful person. I'm really not. I'm asking as more of a
You can't
strategic
see
thing
him.
because
Preston's on his knees.
Yes.
I'm asking more because Pallavi brought up an interesting point, and that she does have an impressive resume, but has, pretty much immediately aligned herself with a president who, I don't have the polling in front of me, but is not wildly popular probably in that district. It's a majority minority district. So is there room for a GOP candidate to hold on to that seat if they come in and maybe at least do something to distance themselves?
Distance is an interesting word, because I think there'd be elements of the Trump agenda that you could support that I believe would keep you in the good graces of that district,
Tax
but you
cuts and
could always separate the Trump from the Trump agenda, in the sense that your criticism of Trump is for his personal
I have a
issues
lot
and his
more.
personal comments,
promise
the
you.
aforementioned statements that you made. So I think there'd be some room there. And again, I don't know where this woman is on the ideological spectrum. I don't know if she's Nelson Rockefeller or if she's Ronald Reagan. I don't know yet. I am not going to label her because of one sentence said at the end of an announcement video. It is not unusual, despite how unpopular the president is, for somebody while running in a party primary to say that they endorse the president. It is done on both sides. I remember, God knows how many Democrats did it for Clinton and Obama and then went running for the hills. But they have to say it. I don't see it any differently than that.
I don't know if they have to say it. I think Rob Woodall is very palatable because he's not a Trump. He hasn't said anything crazy supporting the president. When there was a recount going on, he said he respected it. You could disagree with him on his policies, but you respect the man. And for some reason, they decided that guy who got a 400 vote victory, they were going to run away from that model.
You're presuming facts, not evidence here. There is no evidence yet that they're going to run away from that model.
Well,
We
not
don't know.
in a general.
We
And-
don't know what kind of candidate she's going to be
Well, and
yet.
to your point, a primary is going to be run to the right of the ideological spectrum, just as on the Democrat side, primaries are typically run to the left.
But
on
you
the
can run on
ideological
ideology and not mention Trump. That's the thing. It's a 90-second ad. Every sentence is constructed. It's intentional. It's not like she was giving a speech and just randomly put in Trump. It was done intentionally.
All right,
And that's just how campaign ads are.
we've got to move on. So,
We'll
Governor
talk more
Kemp.
later, Craig.
Okay.
You guys can talk offline more. Governor Kemp had a small statewide tour celebrating his first 100 days in office. I think everybody listening to the show knows where our panelists stand today, but I still think it's worth talking about going through and maybe giving a little bits of grades on the first 100 days for Governor Kemp. Maybe not a grade because Craig made a nasty face when I said that word, but just general thoughts. I mean, do you think, we're just off of the campaign? Has he kept his campaign promises? His approval ratings are going up.
Governor Kemp was in North Fulton today. He spoke at the North Fulton Chamber of Commerce at Atlanta Athletic Club in my hometown of Johns Creek. So that's why I'm wearing the suit here. He gave a very positive.
I thought it was for us.
Oh, sorry. I know. He gave a very positive speech. He was obviously in front of a chamber, so he highlighted economic issues, gave a very positive forecast. There was some a major new investment down at the port. There's some major new investment. I apologize. I should have taken notes. The 2SK, some company, is now going to be some of the largest foreign investment in Georgia in the history of the state. So obviously very good news. He spoke about the signing the marijuana bill, cannabis bill, however you want to describe it. I don't think there was anything that went egregiously wrong with the session. Obviously, there were some controversial bills, but there were always controversial bills. So if you're compelling me to give a letter grade, I guess I would say something along the lines of an A minus. I would give it probably more like a B plus, but then someone would sarcastically state that it was a failure because I didn't give him an A. I'm old enough to know that you can't get everything in your very first session. But for what he focused on, I think he did a very good job with it.
So we started the session and the
See, now I
conversation.
can't be sarcastic.
We started the session and the conversation kind of quickly turned to teacher pay raises in the budget. That had a lot of bipartisan support. It's a great issue to start a new term as governor on because it's not very divisive. Everybody wants to give teachers a pay raise when we can find good money for it. Then we transition into a couple more things that maybe were a little more divisive. Craig, we can come back to you after Pallavi, but I'm kind of curious about the history of first years and if stepping into issues that, garner protest, be it the Medicaid waivers or the heartbeat bill, if those are pretty common in first years. Now, granted, the Medicaid waivers, I should say, are different because he needs a lot of time to do those. So just giving him the authority lets him then go draft a plan that will be ready by next year. So we don't even have a plan yet. He just has the authority to make one with certain guidelines. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know how first years normally go, so I can only kind of judge him on what this year has looked like. I think he has done some good things. The teacher pay raise is great, but he campaigned on 5,000. It's 3,000 right now. I'd like to see that go up next year. The Medicaid waiver, I just can't get behind. It just seems like there's not a whole lot of substance behind it. And we have the polling, we have the data, we know what a Medicaid expansion fiscally looks like. And I wish he would just kind of, go ahead and expand Medicaid and not do the whole staying on the line and figuring out what's ideologically correct and what makes sense. I'd really like him to just go ahead and expand Medicaid. The one thing I was hoping to see more of was getting relief for Michael. And I know he's made some statements about how not Georgia Democrats, House Democrats have given too much to Puerto Rico, or they want too much for Puerto Rico.
They're holding up
and
the process.
He made some statement about giving relief to real Americans or something along those lines that I remember I read it and I just kind of cringed a little bit. I'd like to see that result because I know people in the areas that were affected are hurting really bad.
To be fair to him a little bit, I mean, the package that Georgia's waiting on right now comes from Congress in D.C., and he certainly has, power of word and power of speech, and he can throw weight around a little bit, but it certainly seems like from statements from representatives on both sides that they're just at a stalemate in D.C. I'm not sure what more he could do for that.
Well, he went up there to try to negotiate something, right?
Yeah.
I just wish he wouldn't have made a statement saying they're giving Puerto Rico too much importance, like come back to real America. It was don't quote me. It was something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to see where that word real is, because that's the bullet word right
Some-
there, real.
Again, like I said, don't quote me, but it was something to that effect. And again, the heartbeat bill and the voting machines bill, like you said, there's going to be controversy. But I think here it's a little bit, it kind of starts flirting with the corruption line because the people who are behind the voting machines bill have very close ties with him. I'm also looking forward to seeing what happens from the House investigation, the U.S. House investigation about him. I'm not giving him a grade. I won't do it.
I'm
I'm going to find that quote.
going back to the thing about first years. Well, that's tough. The only reason why I prevaricate is because I don't remember what years Barnes did what in. Barnes was defeated in 2002 for three reasons. Actually, I was talking about this just yesterday. The flag, the teacher tenure issue, and then the outer perimeter. He pushed the outer perimeter, that fell apart. The teacher tenure, teachers whacked back at him like he was a rodent inside of a house. And then the flag just led to a complete uprising all throughout traditional Democrat Middle and South Georgia. But I don't remember what years he did those in. I think he did the flag in the second year. I just don't flat out remember. If you had warned me, I could have looked it up.
Oh yeah,
See when he did those things. But that let's just say he picked up one of those. He was very controversial in that sense, but he always had a Democratic majority behind him both times, and it was a lot more locked in than the Republican. No, I'm not going to say that. Barnes was a master legislator in that regard. He got what he wanted because he had Tom Murphy on his side, and there is never going to be more of a master legislator than Tom Murphy. But he definitely ruffled some feathers. But again, I don't remember if it was first year or not. Sorry.
Can you think of a promise made on the campaign that could be coming up in the next year, the next couple of years? Maybe something that hasn't come up yet, or even something. I can't think of a particular promise he's gone back on, but something that could come up soon.
There'll be lots of. They're constantly trying to find new and innovative ways to help rural Georgia. That's obviously not a one solution problem. I don't think anybody has the magic bullet on how to fix our problems in rural Georgia. It goes to economic and social, and you're trying to fly in the face of economic progress in the last 60 years in this country. There's a reason why the suburbs and the cities are growing and the rural isn't, throughout the whole country. We're not going to be the one state that's going to be able to turn the tide on that. That's just a sad reality. But I think constantly looking for new ways to help rural Georgia will probably be a centerpiece. Maybe he'll dip his toe a little bit more stringently or stridently, in the transportation issue. Because obviously Kemp, the governor needs to do a little bit better in the Atlanta area. And if he can find some sort of way, maybe not a solution, but show a more active involvement in that'd be helpful.
We had that transportation package that ended up not passing, and he has not been shy about expressing frustrations. He said at a recent speech, I'm not sure if this was the 100-day speech or something else, but he said, I had a plan that Delta supported that was going to be a good one for them on the jet fuel tax and would have provided much needed funding for rural airports, like you were talking about, Craig. Some in the legislature, for whatever reason, and I'm still kind of baffled, didn't agree with that. But we're committed to working on that. Still kind of baffled is kind of a strong word for a governor.
He's got 4 sessions before he has to run again. This was just the first. This is kind of what I said when we were talking about the Medicaid. You can't lump sum an entire effort into one session. So I'm sure he'll have a very aggressive agenda next year. Next year will be a little bit more. Everybody will be more presidentially focused. So maybe there might not be any truly huge ticket item, but he's got 3 more to go, and I believe he'll utilize them.
And a good way for him to utilize it and take care of rural Georgia is by expanding Medicaid, because we know how many rural hospitals are closing.
I have no doubt that if he sees a good solution and the power is now granted to him, he will utilize it.
It's not something that he just kind of stumbled upon his first year. We've been talking about it at the General Assembly for quite a few years now. I believe if he wanted to, he could make it happen.
Yeah, by July of next year, we will see what this Medicaid waiver healthcare plan looks like, and we'll be able to dig into the numbers. I think, unfortunately, it will come out just in time for everybody to get put in their own camps for it right before a big election. But the plan already has certain barriers in place, but we'll be able to see if it comes back with something like a work requirement or something like that, and who's actually going to be developing the plan.
Doesn't expanding Medicaid actually help them with the re-election?
I'm the host. Why don't you ask your counterpart here?
I mean, if he's the governor to expand Medicaid and give how many millions of Georgians actual health insurance?
Is it millions?
Is it higher?
500,000.
Oh, I don't know.
Exactly.
That's a tough call, because even if he gives them something that they've never had before, they might fault him for not giving him even more. So I'm not sure whether it will help him or not, depending on the details in the plan.
As someone who currently would probably fall into that Medicaid expansion bracket, I'm going to withhold my comments.
I could just easily see. I'm not going to try to quantify it. He puts forward a plan that gives you 5 out of 10, let's say. And I could easily see the Democratic nominee in 2022 saying, well, darn it, you should have given us 8 out of 10. And it'll get it all riled up, and suddenly that margin of 3 will be the campaign issue, and that's where the battle will be fought. So, you always have to be careful about exactly giving your political opponents everything that they think they want, because then they're just going to want more and criticize you for not doing more. But that's really big picture right there.
Are you giving your political opponent something, or are you giving the people of your state who elected you something?
Some people are just never happy with what's put forward. So
I'd be pretty happy. Anyways, let's wrap up this week. I want to talk about what I'm watching in this upcoming week of news. Cheating a little bit and going back in time. Read a feature in Atlanta Magazine earlier this week. It's been going around. It's caught wildfire across the country. The title: Why are rare cancers killing so many people in a small Georgia town? Pretty intense title. It is an incredible story. Does exactly what I think journalism should do. Lays out the emotional case and the factual case with all of the players involved. I encourage everybody to go read it. It's really quite a piece of work, and I hope the story doesn't stop, because there are some things that need to be gotten to the bottom of on all parties there. So go give it a read. That's on atlantamagazine.com, and we'll put something out on our Twitter page so everybody can get to the link through there. Craig, what are we looking forward to this week?
Oh, I was desperately pointing to my colleague so she could go first, because I don't really have anything too passionate.
I am looking forward to the Johns Creek International Festival. It's going to be awesome. It's tomorrow. I'm going to be doing some voter registration, eating some great food. I'm going to be eating carbs. It's going to be a great day. I'm looking forward to it.
I have heard that is quite fun. I'm going to try and get there.
They have carbs.
Apparently a lot of carbs.
Yeah. I am performing in a concert at Johns Creek United Methodist that same night, tomorrow night, which is Saturday night.
11 to 8.
Go to the International Festival and then come see me sing some Disney tunes.
And I would warn people to give themselves plenty of time to get there. This will the traffic on 141 will get backed up. This will most likely be the last year that we have the International Festival on Heisman Field. As the plan goes, we will move it to the new linear park, which is over in the Tech Park area, over in Shake Rag. So we will move all of that traffic off the main thoroughfare and into the industrial area where there's no Saturday traffic. That is the hope. So, but give yourself plenty of time when you're getting there. And I will be at the International Festival as well. It should be a lot of fun. We had 22,000 people last year at it. We're hoping to beat that up a little bit. And Jay Lynn, my city councilman, his restaurant will be well in place there, so you can definitely eat some of his food,
some of his carbs.
So and I will have I will be there as well for some of it.
Excellent. This has been the the Georgia Politics Podcast.
Did we just agree on that last point?
Everybody loves a parade.
The International Festival.
Everybody loves a parade.
It's wow.
It's a bipartisan international festival. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening this week. Follow us on our Twitter account, GA Politics Pod on Twitter. Subscribe to the show. Share it with your friends. For Preston Thompson, signing off for our hosts, we will talk to everybody in 2 weeks. Pallavi forced me into my partisan hackery, but other than that, it was a good show.
That was fine.